The afternoon sun dipped behind the trees as Emily Harris parked her car in front of the old white farmhouse where she grew up. The house looked smaller than she remembered, its paint faded, the porch steps cracked. For years, she'd avoided coming back, telling herself she was too busy, too far away, too changed. But deep down, she knew it was fear. Fear of facing her father again. Her mother had passed when Emily was only 20. After that, her father, Robert Harris, had become quieter, colder. He rarely said much, just worked in his woodshop behind the house, keeping himself surrounded by tools and sawdust instead of people. Emily left for college soon after and never looked back. Now, 12 years later, she was 32, tired of city life, and full of questions she'd never asked. When she stepped out of the car, the cool Vermont air brushed against her face. She hesitated at the door, her heart pounding with an odd mix of nostalgia and guilt. Before she could knock, the door opened. Her father stood there, thinner and grayer than she remembered, his cane resting by the frame. "Emily," he said quietly, his voice carrying both surprise and warmth. She forced a small smile. "Hi, Dad." He didn't speak for a moment, just nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." The living room smelled of pine and old books. The furniture hadn't changed. The same brown couch, the same clock ticking softly on the mantel. Time had stopped here, while Emily's life had rushed ahead and burned out somewhere along the way. She sat down, unsure what to say. He moved slowly to his armchair, lowering himself with effort. Silence filled the room until she broke it. "You look good," she said. He gave a faint smile. "You don't have to lie, Emily. I look like an old tree still standing, but full of cracks." She laughed, a small sound that lightened the air. "Still stubborn, I see." "That hasn't changed," he said. They talked about small things. First, the town, the weather, the neighbor's new barn, but every word carried years of distance. Emily kept glancing at his hands, once strong and steady, now thin and trembling. She thought of all the times he'd built things with those hands, her childhood bed, her first bookshelf, even the wooden jewelry box she still kept in her apartment. Finally, he looked at her with a quiet seriousness. "So what brought you back?" She hesitated. "I guess I just needed to see home again." He nodded slowly. "Home doesn't change much. People do." His words sank into her chest. She wondered if that was his way of saying he'd missed her, but didn't know how to say it. That night, as they ate a simple dinner of soup and bread, Emily found herself watching him closely. He still took tiny bites, still folded his napkin neatly beside the plate. Every small gesture felt familiar and foreign at once. When the dishes were done, he poured them both tea and sat across from her at the wooden table. The house creaked softly in the wind. "I heard you moved again," he said. "Third time this year." Emily sighed. "Yeah, I just couldn't find the right place." He studied her for a long moment. "You've been looking for something, haven't you?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Peace," he said. "You've been chasing peace your whole life." She looked down at her hands, unsure how to respond. He was right. She had chased jobs, relationships, cities, but peace always slipped through her fingers. He leaned back, his voice softer. "You used to love sitting by the lake as a girl. You said the water made you feel calm. Do you ever sit by water anymore?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I guess I forgot how." "Then maybe," he said, "that's where you should start." Something about his tone made her chest ache. She hadn't expected this version of him, gentle, reflective. Growing up, he had been all rules and silence. But now every word carried the weight of a lifetime. Later that night, Emily couldn't sleep. She walked through the dark house, tracing her fingers over old photographs, her mother smiling by the Christmas tree, her father holding her as a baby, the three of them standing by the lake. A family frozen in time. She found herself stopping by the door of his workshop. The smell of wood shavings hit her immediately. On the workbench sat a half-finished carving of a bird, beautiful, delicate. She ran her hand over it carefully, feeling the rough edges where he'd stopped. Still can't resist touching things. His voice came from behind her. She turned quickly. He was leaning on his cane, smiling faintly. "Sorry," she whispered. He shook his head. "That's all right. It was meant for you anyway." She blinked. "For me?" He nodded. "Started it years ago. Never finished. Didn't know what it should be. Maybe you'll tell me someday." For a moment, neither spoke. The room felt full of something unspoken: love, regret, maybe both. Finally, he sighed and looked toward the window. "Your mother used to say you were born with her heart. She was right. You feel everything too deeply. It's both a blessing and a curse." Emily swallowed hard. "I miss her." "So do I," he said softly. "Every day." She wanted to ask about the last days, about what her mother had said before she passed. But something in his face told her it still hurt to speak of it. Instead, she whispered, "I wish I'd stayed longer after." He cut her off gently. "No, Emily, you needed to leave. You needed to live." His words hit her with unexpected warmth. All these years, she'd believed he resented her for leaving. Now she realized he had understood all along. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window. Emily made coffee the way her mother used to, the smell filling the kitchen. Her father shuffled in wearing his old plaid robe, smiled when he saw her. "You remembered," he said. She handed him a cup. "Some things stick." They sat in comfortable silence until he spoke again. "Emily, there's something I've been meaning to tell you." Her pulse quickened. "What is it?" He stared into his mug. "When your mother passed, she asked me to give you a letter. I couldn't do it then. I thought it would hurt too much. But now, I think you're ready." Emily's heart froze. "A letter." He nodded. "It's in the old chest in her room. Top drawer. She wrote it the night before she went to the hospital." She stood up slowly, her hands trembling. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I thought I was protecting you," he said quietly. "But I see now. Maybe I was protecting myself." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air felt heavy with emotion. Then, in that calm, weathered voice, he added, "Your mother loved you more than words could ever hold. She wanted you to remember that no matter what happens. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about staying, even when it's hard." Emily sat back down, tears in her eyes. The words felt like something her heart had been waiting years to hear. Her father reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and placed it over hers. "I wasn't always good at saying the right things, Emily, but if I've learned anything, it's this. You don't have to chase the world to find meaning. Sometimes it's already right here." His eyes glistened as he spoke, and she realized it might have taken him a lifetime to say those words. She squeezed his hand. "I'm here now, Dad," smiled softly. "That's all I ever wanted." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and rain. For the first time in years, Emily felt something settle inside her, something quiet, something real. She didn't know what the letter would say. She didn't know what was coming next. But she knew this moment mattered, and later, when she would read her mother's final words and hear her father's truth, she would understand what he meant when he said, "There's always time until there isn't." The morning air felt crisp as Emily stood in front of her parents' old bedroom door. She hadn't stepped inside that room since her mother's funeral 12 years ago. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet, and the faint scent of lavender still lingered in the air, like a memory that refused to fade. Her father's words from the kitchen echoed in her mind. "There's a letter in the top drawer. She wanted you to have it." Emily hesitated, her fingers trembling as she reached for the handle. She opened the drawer slowly, almost afraid of what she might find. Inside lay a few faded photographs, an old silver locket, and a folded cream-colored envelope with her name written in delicate cursive. Emily Grace Harris. Her mother's handwriting. Her chest tightened. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking as she held the letter. The paper was worn but carefully preserved, like something her father couldn't bear to touch too often. Taking a deep breath, she opened it. The letter began softly. In her mother's familiar tone, My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to tell you these words myself. But know this, my love for you has never ended, and it never will. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She blinked them away, forcing herself to read on. You have your father's strength and my heart. And sometimes that combination will hurt. You'll want to love deeply, but fear being hurt. You'll want to dream big, but worry you're not enough. When that happens, remember, you are both the storm and the calm after it. You were born to rise again, no matter how far you fall. Emily pressed the letter to her chest, unable to stop the tears now. Her mother's voice felt alive in every word, gentle, wise, and full of quiet power. She read on. Your father loves you more than you think. He doesn't always know how to show it. When I met him, he was a man of few words but strong hands. When I was sick, he didn't know how to be strong and soft at the same time. Don't mistake his silence for distance. It's love, Emily, just a quieter kind. Her breath caught. She had spent years resenting her father's silence, thinking he didn't care. But reading these words, she realized it had never been coldness. It had been fear, grief, and love locked behind a wall he didn't know how to tear down. The last lines of the letter read, when the world feels too heavy, go back to the lake. Sit by the water, listen. That's where I'll be in every ripple, in every breeze that brushes your hair. And remember, love doesn't die. It changes shape, but it's always with you. By the time she finished, Emily was crying openly. She folded the letter carefully and held it close, feeling her mother's presence so vividly it almost hurt. That afternoon, Emily found her father outside near the woodshop, sanding a piece of oak. She watched him for a moment, his movements slow but deliberate. He didn't notice her until she spoke. I read the letter, she said softly. He stopped and looked up. I figured you would. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Why didn't you tell me how much she's still? How much she thought about us? He wiped his hands on a cloth and sighed. I didn't know how to talk about her without falling apart. Every time I looked at you, I saw her, your eyes, your smile, even the way you laugh. It hurt too much at first, but maybe I waited too long to tell you. Emily walked closer, her voice trembling. She wrote about you, about how you loved quietly. I think I understand now. He gave a faint, wistful smile. She always understood me better than I understood myself. For a while, they stood in silence. Then Emily looked at the unfinished bird carving on his workbench. She said, you don't show love with words. You build it. He chuckled softly. That sounds like her. She reached out to touch the carving again. You were making this for her, weren't you? He hesitated before nodding. Yeah, it was supposed to be a gift for our anniversary. I started it a week before she got sick. I never finished. I didn't have the heart to. Emily smiled gently. Maybe we can finish it together. He looked at her, his eyes softening. You'd help an old man carve a bird. I'd help you with anything, she said. Something broke open in that moment, years of silence, of missed chances, of words left unsaid. Later that evening, they worked side by side in the fading sunlight. The air was filled with the rhythmic sound of sanding wood and the occasional quiet laughter. Emily hadn't felt this close to her father since she was a little girl sitting on the workbench, watching him create magic with his hands. When they finished smoothing the last edge, he handed her the carving knife. You do the final lines, he said. She hesitated. I don't want to ruin it. He won't, he said simply. You just have to trust yourself. With slow, careful strokes, Emily carved a few delicate lines into the bird's wings. When she was done, she set the knife down and looked at him. What do you think? He studied it for a moment, then smiled. It's perfect. The bird looked ready to take flight, its wings open, carved as if it were caught mid-soar. Emily felt something stir deep within her, a strange peace she hadn't felt in years. Her father leaned back on the stool. Your mother would have loved this. Think she does, Emily said softly. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. The two sat quietly for a long time, listening to the evening settle around them. After a while, her father spoke again. Emily, there's something else I need to say. She turned to him. His voice was steady but low, carrying the weight of time. I spent a long time being angry at life, at losing her, at myself. I thought if I stayed busy, it would hurt less. But it just made me lonely. I wish I'd told you sooner how proud I am of you. You built a life for yourself. You're stronger than I ever was. Emily's eyes filled again. I spent a long time thinking you didn't care, Dad, but I see now you just didn't know how to show it. He smiled faintly. Guess we both had things to learn. She nodded, whispering, We're learning now. He looked out at the fading light. Your mother always said love's not about how long you have someone, but how deeply you remember them. Emily swallowed hard. You both gave me more love than I ever realized. He reached for her hand, his grip weak but warm. And you gave me a reason to keep going. The words were simple, but they landed like a promise, one that would never fade, that night. As Emily lay in her childhood bed, she held her mother's letter close. The moonlight spilled through the curtains, and the house felt different now, alive, warm, full of peace. She thought about how easily time could slip away, how people often waited too long to say what truly mattered. She made a quiet vow to herself. Never again. Never again would she let silence build walls between her and the people she loved. In the stillness, she could almost hear her mother's voice. Go back to the lake. A tear rolled down her cheek as she whispered, Tomorrow, Mom. I'll go tomorrow. She drifted to sleep with the letter beside her, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The next morning, the sky was gray and calm, the kind of morning that carried both stillness and quiet reflection. Emily woke early, her mother's letter still resting on the nightstand beside her. She looked at it for a long moment before carefully tucking it into her coat pocket. She knew where she needed to go, the lake her mother had mentioned. The one where they used to spend summer afternoons when she was little, downstairs. The smell of coffee drifted through the kitchen. Her father was already sitting by the window, a mug in hand, staring at the field beyond the backyard. He looked older in the morning light, but there was something softer about him. The distance that once lived in his eyes seemed to have faded overnight. You're up early, he said. Glancing at her, I'm going to the lake, she replied. He nodded slowly. I figured you might. Your mom loved it there. Do you want to come with me? She asked gently. He hesitated for a moment, then set his mug down. Yeah, I think I should. They didn't say much as they got ready. Emily packed a small blanket and 2 thermoses of coffee, and he grabbed an old fishing hat that had belonged to her mother. When they stepped outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of pine. The path to the lake was still familiar, winding through tall trees and quiet fields. A place that time hadn't changed. For most of the walk, neither spoke. There was no need. The silence between them felt peaceful, not heavy. The crunch of leaves under their boots and the sound of distant birds filled the space where words once struggled to live. When they finally reached the lake, the view took Emily's breath away. The water shimmered under the soft light of dawn, perfectly still except for the gentle ripples caused by a light breeze. Her father spread the blanket near the shore. They both sat down. I used to sit right there, Emily said, pointing to a flat rock near the edge of the water. Mom would read and I'd try to skip stones. I could never get past 2 skips. Father smiled faintly. She said you'd get frustrated and throw a handful of pebbles instead. Emily laughed softly. Yeah, and she'd say, Patience, Em. The lake isn't going anywhere. He nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. She had a way of making everything feel slower, like time wasn't something to fight. They sat quietly again, listening to the gentle lapping of water. For the first time in years, Emily felt her heart slow to match the rhythm of the lake. After a long pause, her father spoke. I came here a week after she passed. Key? Emily looked at him, surprised. You did? He nodded. I couldn't sleep. So I drove out here in the middle of the night. I sat on that same rock and talked to her, or at least I tried to. I didn't know what to say. I just kept asking her why she left so soon. His voice broke a little. But he didn't stop. And then I remembered something she used to tell me. She said, when I'm gone, don't look for me in the sky. Look for me where the water meets the light. Emily felt tears welling in her eyes again. She wrote something similar in her letter. He turned to her, his expression thoughtful. She always believed the lake held memories, that every reflection carried something of us. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees. Emily stared at the water, and for a moment, she swore she saw two shapes reflected side by side, her and her mother. Just as it used to be. She's here, she whispered. Her father nodded slowly. Yeah, she is. They spend the morning talking, really talking, for the first time in years. Emily told him about her life in Chicago, about the small coffee shop she'd been working at, and how she'd been too afraid to follow her dream of opening her own bakery. He listened, not interrupting, just absorbing every word. When she finished, he said quietly, "You've got her spirit, you know?" She was scared of a lot of things too, but she never let it stop her. Emily smiled sadly. I wish I had her courage. Her father looked out at the lake. You do? You just haven't trusted yourself to use it yet. She let those words sink in. They were simple, but they felt powerful. For years, she'd carried doubt like a second shadow, always afraid of failing, of not being enough. Hearing those words from him felt like something inside her had finally been set free. After a while, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. There's something I've been meaning to give you. Emily looked at him curiously as he handed it to her. The box was old, carved from dark oak with initials engraved on the lid. J&L. She opened it carefully. Inside was her mother's wedding ring, a small gold band with a tiny diamond. She told me to give this to you when I thought you were ready, he said quietly. I think that time's now. Emily stared at the ring, her hands trembling. Dad, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep her close, he said, not in sadness, but in strength. She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. I'll keep her with me always. He smiled faintly. That's all she ever wanted. The rest of the day passed slowly, filled with stories, laughter, and memories. They shared sandwiches and talked about old family trips, the ones where the car would break down, and her mother would turn it into an adventure instead of a disaster as the sun began to set, painting the water gold and orange. Emily leaned back on the blanket and looked at her father. You know, I used to think coming home would make me feel trapped again, but now I think it's what I needed. He nodded. Sometimes the place that hurts you most is the one that heals you. She smiled softly. You sound like Mom, he chuckled. Maybe she finally rubbed off on me after all these years. When the first stars began to appear, he grew quiet again. Emily noticed the distant look in his eyes. What is it? She asked gently. There's something else I need to tell you, he said. Something I should have said a long time ago. Her stomach tightened. What is it, Dad? He looked at her, his expression serious but calm. The night your mother passed, she made me promise two things. First, to make sure you never stopped dreaming. And second, he paused, taking a shaky breath, to tell you how proud she was and how much she believed you'd do something beautiful with your life. Emily covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She said that? He nodded. Every word. She leaned over and hugged him tightly, the kind of embrace that spoke all the things words couldn't. Thank you, Dad, she whispered. He held her close, his voice breaking. No, sweetheart. Thank you for coming back, for letting me try again. They stayed by the lake until the moon rose high above the trees, casting silver light across the water. The reflection shimmered like 1,000 tiny diamonds. And for the first time in years, Emily felt complete peace as they packed up to leave. She turned one last time toward the lake. Goodbye, Mom, she whispered. But it didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like a beginning. Her father put a hand on her shoulder. You know, he said softly, she used to tell me life isn't about waiting for the right moment. It's about making the moment right. Emily smiled, repeating his words in her mind. Make the moment right. On the drive home, The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of love finally spoken aloud. Emily looked out the window at the stars and thought about her mother's letter, her father's strength, and how sometimes it takes losing something to learn how to truly hold on. That night, as she drifted to sleep back in her old room, she felt a quiet shift inside her, the kind that only happens when you've forgiven, healed, and finally found your way home. Her father's words echoed in her mind one last time. "You're stronger than you think. Emily, don't waste that." She smiled through her tears. She wouldn't, not anymore. And as the moonlight touched her face, she whispered, "I'll make you both proud."